Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to Jamie Berger Academic Coach Video 2. The most important thing I learned from Video 1 is that I shouldn't look at myself, I should look at you. And I knew that going in, but try it sometime. Looking at that little camera at the top of the screen feels incredibly weird. Okay, so starting next week, I'll be giving you little mini free lessons on the verbal parts of the ACT and the SAT. But as promised, first off, today I am going to ramble on a little bit more. Last week I talked about the cheating scandal and what real and good academic coaches do, i.e. not help people cheat. Go back and check that out if you want to know my thoughts on that. And I promised in that, that video that I would talk a little bit about meritocracy, which is also in the news these days a lot, and that, pardon me, I was taught from a very young age to be very skeptical of, and that I now want to come out and straight out state that a lot of what we've been hearing and reading these past couple weeks is about the failure of meritocracy. And what I want to talk a little bit about is that, but beyond that, about why meritocracy is not something we should be rooting for. All right, got some notes and bullet points I will have to look down at from time to time. First of all, let me direct you to a really good episode of On the Media from about a week ago. If you just go to your podcast app and search for On the Media, you'll find it. It goes into meritocracy and its successes and failures, and with a guest named John Patrick Leary, who's an academic in education at Wayne State University, I believe. And he brings up a couple of points. He reminded me of how the term came to be. It came from a British novel in the 50s or 60s, and it was meant to be a satirical term that was pointing out that Britain at the time had supposedly replaced aristocracy with meritocracy that was supposed to be more fair because people would be getting into schools and succeeding based on their intellectual merits. The problem with that is who succeeds in school is based on who they're born to, and we'll get into that in a little while later. So there's no real merit in grades and scores being what helps someone get into school. So at the end of the segment on meritocracy, Leary talks about two myths. That the one myth of meritocracy is that there is such a thing as meritocracy in America, where the best and brightest go on to the best schools. Lately, nobody believes that, it seems to me, except people in deep denial whose kids get to go to the best schools. His second point, the second myth, is that the U.S. is actually too committed to meritocracy, which I think for 40 years or so, as our public schools have been gutted, we clearly are not. But what I think he misses is that, and I want to quote that, or paraphrase that, he finishes off his segment by stating that after all, USC is still going to cost $70,000 per year, more or less. So the really big scandal here is not how college admissions works when people are cheating, but how it works when people aren't cheating, i.e. it's inherently unfair even when rich people aren't straight out cheating. But myth number 3, or falsehood number 3 about this term meritocracy, is that it would be a good thing in a perfect world. This is all going to lead to coaching and how this work helps high school students get to where they want to be and figure out who they want to be and what they want to do. And so I'm going to go into a little background and then my own college admission story. And I hope you'll either indulge me or just shut this off. Ostensibly, why standardized tests exist is to make it clear to colleges the relative meaning of a grade at one high school compared to another. The reason the SAT exists. An A at a high school somewhere in Iowa as compared to an A at a prep school in Connecticut. So if everybody takes the same tests and people do different levels, it helps measure. That is what I've always felt, and many would say is ostensibly, supposedly, why these tests came to be in the first place. But again, as public schools have been gutted and students are taught more and more how to pass tests and not how to think or create, it all becomes just a test in test-taking ability and in having practice taking a test with some skill involved. Okay, next point is that the term merit in the word meritocracy refers pretty much to, and the merit that comes in the National Merit Scholarship and how well you do in school and on tests has to do pretty much with the age-old reading, writing, and arithmetic. And that, for 30 years or so, has been slowly debunked as what intelligence should mean. Back in 1983, I looked this up today, I don't know it offhand, there was a professor, I didn't write down his name, but he put forth the idea of multiple intelligences. That is, claiming that what standardized tests and IQ tests test is not intelligence, it's a very particular kind. It's logical reasoning, it's memorization, it's reading, writing, and arithmetic, more or less. And that there are so many other kinds, be it hand-eye coordination, physical intelligence. I think everyone out there would say that their best mechanic they've ever had work on their car is as smart as they are. I would say that. I hope more people do besides me. But they aren't treated that way. They aren't rewarded that way by society. So the merit in meritocracy isn't really awarding anything to people in society based on anything more than a very, very narrow subjective definition of what merit is. So that's why I'm arguing that there's a third point here besides that, is there a meritocracy in the US, or are we committed to such a thing, is that it's a bad thing altogether. Because who gets to define what merit is? And why, going back to my own childhood, let's just pause for a second and think about this. Who were the most important teachers you ever had? Take 5 seconds. Were they your professors? And I realize I've been forgetting to look at the camera. For me, they're not my professors. They are grade school teachers and high school teachers. Mrs. Everett. And they are valued the least of any teachers in society and less than almost any kind of professional in society. They aren't even considered professionals. They aren't paid like professionals. And they have a certain kind of intelligence that professors don't. Professors largely are the most rewarded, and what they are good at is writing and researching. Maybe giving lectures, not even so much anymore. Great teachers aren't rewarded at any level, especially at that incredibly formative level of grade school and high school. So back in '83, after the theory of multiple intelligences came out, in the '80s and '90s, people started to talk about emotional intelligence, and a book by Daniel Goleman called Emotional Intelligence, which is great to look up, and that is spoken about more and more these days. But is it rewarded by society? Still not so much, and we don't seem really on the way to doing that, except that At fancy schools, we try to teach young people mindfulness, emotional intelligence, communication skills, critical thinking, all stuff that relates to emotional intelligence. While at the public schools, they're teaching them how to do well on tests. And while colleges and jobs are rewarding largely in terms of getting that first job, getting into college, getting into law school, getting into business school, it's your grades and your scores and your ability to interview, which is that emotional intelligence. Okay, so I've talked to you about different kinds of intelligences and why meritocracy is just not a thing that you should be rooting for. Now, I also want to give you another point of reference. If you want to read about the test industry and how testing has valued this false concept of meritocracy, look at Nicholas Lehman's book from, I think, in 2000, around there, called The Big Test. It's another good one. All right. So now I'd like to look at my own college admissions and upbringing experience in terms of what Warren Buffett, of all people, calls the ovarian lottery, which is when, where you're born, what gender you are, what race you are, what class you are, stuff that is it's worse than the luck of the draw. Most people are inherently born disadvantaged. And that's why it's a lottery. It's a lottery that Donald Trump won. Okay, we're not going to go there. All right. So here's my story and how I ended up going to Columbia with much less than the average grades to get in. And why I really encourage students to apply to a couple of real reach schools, even if they ostensibly can't get in, and even if their guidance counselors are telling them not to apply. My ovarian lottery win was being born to two communicative professors, an English teacher and a philosophy professor. I would almost say another lottery win was being an only child. I was spoken to by adults as treated as an adult from a very young age. I learned to communicate with and as an adult in conversation from a very young age, and I listened, and I was given lessons from my philosopher dad in ethics and morals and decision making, and from my mother in reading and writing. So on top of having them send me to good schools, and I ended up going to, despite what my liberal academic parents, for complicated reasons I won't go into here because I'm already long, I went to a little private school in Albany in the 80s. And in the 80s in Albany, middle and upper middle class people were largely afraid of New York City beyond going to a Broadway show or a Yankee game. Columbia was at the bottom of the Ivies at the time and was not struggling, but it certainly has rebounded. When I tell people, high school students I work with, they ask me, of course, where I went to college, and they're blown away when I went to Columbia. Back then, it was still impressive, but it wasn't what it is today. It was considered as this scary school in Harlem. And no one from my high school had applied in many years. In high school, I was the kind of student I try to teach others not to be now. I got A's in English and history and B's or C's or even one D plus in languages, science, and math. I wasn't terrible at them. I just didn't like them, so I didn't try very hard. So going into junior year of high school, I didn't have a very good GPA. We took the PSAT, and I got the third best score in the class. It was only a class of 44, and the score was not that great, but it was much better than anyone at my high school expected. And suddenly, what everybody, myself, my parents, and I expected, which was that my parents taught at SUNY Albany. good school. I could go there. I could go there cheaper than other schools. Suddenly, my horizons widened, and I also started doing a little better academically junior year, and it's really important. I point out to students if they walk into junior year and they've had a bad freshman and sophomore year for whatever reason, I really encourage them to put it behind them because improvement is super important to colleges. If you have a good junior year, if you bounce back, it's a big deal. So I was doing a little better. I got these good scores. My SAT scores turned out really well. I was the kind of kid, it was a class of 44, as I said. So I played two sports. I was on the literary magazine and the newspaper, and I acted in plays. And I could talk to people, and I could read and write. And so when I had and beyond all that, perhaps one of the biggest lucks of the draw is I had a guidance counselor who really, really liked me and went to bat for me. Baxter Ball, rest in peace. And when I applied to Columbia, decided to apply to Columbia, I was a little punk rocker and I wanted to go to New York City. It wasn't really so much about Columbia, but Columbia was I applied, decided to apply early decision. And in another video, I'll talk about early action, early decision, and what you should choose. But early decision means you're bound to go to that school. If you get in, you get to go. And as I often talk to students, I tell them that applying to college is not like dating. In dating, sure, it may pay off to be a little aloof. Nobody wants someone who'd have them for a member in their club. The old Woody Allen bit. The more you show a college that you're interested, the more they will be like, that's great, we like that. And then they'll still measure you based on merit, as it were. So I applied early decision to Columbia, and I wrote and worked really hard on my college essay, which I often work with students for 3 or 4 months on various versions of several, 2 or 3 different essays until they find the one that really, really speaks to who they are. And again, in another video, I'll talk about writing the college essay. But so I wrote an essay about my love of political cartoons like Doonesbury and Herb Block and the history of that. So I was already unique in that way. I wasn't writing about my big soccer win or being the star of the play it was something a little offbeat and different. Also, back in those days, everyone had an interview with a real admissions officer. Now there are just too many people applying to schools. And I don't really remember my interview or the interviewer, but I know that Baxter, my guidance counselor, told me I did really well. And of course I did. I was raised by my parents to know how to talk to grown-ups and not BS them. I really talked about what was important to me, why I loved Columbia, why I really wanted to go there, wanted to go to New York. I had a great interview. I wrote a good essay. I had good test scores. When I graduated, the end of the first semester of junior year, which is all they can measure, I think I had a 2.97 GPA. And I think December 9th, 1982, 81, I got the letter admitting me to Columbia early decision. Was it pure meritocracy? No. And here's where I want to speak to the latest scandal at Stuyvesant High School and other the select New York public schools. Stuyvesant High School is an elite, traditionally science and math school that I'm speaking kind of off the cuff here. I haven't done my homework, but admission is based almost solely on a test. And last week, it came out, probably people were focusing on it in the wake of the cheating scandal, that I think 7 or 9 students of color, or I think more specifically, Black students, were admitted to next year's freshman class out of a couple hundred per class. That's pure meritocracy. And the converse of this is that there are a lot of lawsuits out there right now from Asian students complaining that they didn't get into Ivies with better grades and scores than white students, and that that's not fair. And in terms of meritocracy, they're right, it's not fair. But a college doesn't build a class based on meritocracy, especially an elite school. Harvard could have all 1,500 plus straight A students, and they'd have a really, really boring freshman class every year. They pick athletes and actors and people whose last name is Obama, and people who are going to be, they can afford to take risks on some people like me because their reputation is solid, and they have enough super elite merit-based students that they want to round out a class. The lawsuits are claiming that that shouldn't be done that way anymore. And while I understand the people's complaints, I also don't agree that it should be merit-based. Otherwise, as demographics change in a country, schools will be all one race and then all another race and all whatever aspiring group has come to a country. And so I approve of them making choices based on more than just merit, as we define it, because I think merit is bullshit. Uh-oh, I swore. So there's my story. And there's a story there that's important for students that I work with. And I do tell them a shorter version of this story about how you should find and appreciate your skills. I didn't until just recently appreciate that I have communication skills and that my ability to read and write and help others do so. It's always seemed like, well, anybody can do that. Not anybody can take apart an engine. But no, not anybody can do what I do. And I've learned to value those things. And I try as a teenager instead of someone at about 45 to help people realize what their skills are, what they want to be, what they want to do. I recently had a student who started working with me very briefly. And he's been struggling in high school. He has all kinds of issues and just doesn't like high school. And when he stopped working with me, I wrote him an email. He and his father had already talked about that he might not even finish high school and that we really want to encourage him to at least do that. And I mentioned that there's a good tech school in our area if he wanted to do that, even though his parents are people who went to the middle school route, or the middle class or beyond route of college and success. That maybe it just isn't the thing for him and that he should find skill. I wrote him an email saying they should find what he loves and what he's good at, but that at all costs, and any high schooler watching this out here, I know a lot of people in their 30s and 40s now who never finished high school, never got their GED, and they're slinging hash, they're cooking, they're doing physical labor that they would rather not be doing. Get that high school degree. And if you want to go to college, I can help. I think I've covered most of my bases here about the hazards of meritocracy, about how what gets you into college isn't just your academics, nor should it be, and nor should you say, oh, well, I can't go to SUNY Purchase because my SUNYs are trickier. Because public schools are so big, I'm rambling on, that they have to depend on the test scores to an extent. But that you shouldn't base where you apply strictly on where you fall on a graph of who gets into this school or not. And you should take a couple of risks and find other schools that you'll be happy with if you don't get into those reach schools. This has been about double as long as I'd hoped it would be. Next week, I will start to give you short little 5 to 8 minute lessons, maybe 15 at most, in how to do well in the verbal sections of these two big, stupid tests. Thanks for watching. Talk to you soon. Look at the camera, Jamie.